everybody, and thanks for joining me today. So Happy New Year. Expecting to get this one done in the new year. I have less than 30,000 stitches to go, so that's definitely doable. It's just sort of a question of when. I am working on the final pass across this piece, and I've reached the bottom of it. So actually a fair ways in. I'm about 8 columns in has been completed and continuing to work across towards the right hand side there. Today I'm working on the fence. The brass decorative piece kind of curves this way, so I'm kind of doing sort of that curve and going downwards, and then I'm going to come upwards and sort of fill in that brass piece and sort of what's between it, the flowers and stuff showing between the different bars there. So not really working diagonally, unless maybe kind of working more diagonally the other way than how I used to do it. Alrighty. So like I said, less than 30,000 stitches left. If I manage 6,000 per month, which I have been managing to do pretty consistently, then that would make end of May a viable goal. I managed actually more than 8,000 stitches in December, but I did have time off work, so more time to stitch, whereas back to the routine pretty soon. And also it is a Olympic year for the Winter Olympics, so I will be, of course, watching that coverage, so that's going to kind of cut into some of the stitching time. Because normally, by now, all we really have left are a couple more competitions in the Worlds, but like I said, this year is the Olympics, so that will be exciting. Alrighty. We have had some wild weather swings here. Okay, so I can see that there's part of this dark blue goes this way, another bit goes that way. So I'm going to kind of cut it off to about here and then sort of fill in, I think is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to sort of let one branch off. I'll leave that to do later. I'm going to do some of it and kind of then fill in everything to the left and below it from this point onward. There are, as you can see, some bigger blocks today. Not as much confetti, so I imagine I should be able to make some pretty good progress today, which is always nice. I hope everyone had a good holiday season and that getting back into the routine is not too terribly difficult for you. Pardon me if you hear some noise in the background. My son is off work for another couple of days, so that would be who you're hearing if you hear anyone in the background. Pardon me. Yeah, plus the house feels like it echoes once you take all the all the Christmas decorations down. You only have it up for like a month, but you get used to it, and then when it's gone, the place seems very empty. At least it certainly does to me. Oh, pardon me. We had a quiet holiday season. We invited some relatives over, but in the end, they weren't able to make it. They just had other stuff come up, and we had a bit of a snowstorm too over that time. My husband had time off work, but he had to go out almost every day to to clear snow because a whole bunch more fell. Ooh. Yeah, I saw a meme saying anyone who says do it right the first time, you don't have to do it again, says, well, they never tried to keep a driveway clear during a Canadian winter. Oh dear. We had our old mail carrier really complained about that too, postal worker. And the thing is, we cleared it every morning and evening. We cleared it, and there was one day that it was snowing like crazy, and they complained about like half an inch of snow on the driveway. And I'm like, okay, but like we got to go to work. What do you expect me to do? Stay at home all day to brush off every flake of snow that falls on the ground? Like, it's not like it hadn't been cleared for a week. Shoveled it just that morning before leaving for work. Oh, we got a different carrier now who's a lot more pleasant. All right, so I started exactly 280,000 for this month. So keeping track of how many stitches I get done should be nice and easy. Partly why I stopped sort of right at that nice round number. I do like when it makes it easy to calculate. And if I manage 6,900 stitches this month, that will leave me with exactly 20,000 stitches remaining. That will be nice. Started this in 2023. I started doing Stitch With Me sessions May of 2023, and but I did do, of course, some beforehand because that upper left corner was almost entirely white, so I filled that in off camera. And like I say, I don't work on just one project anymore. I do split my time between a couple of others, so the I'd say around 3 years is about right. I've been managing about 100,000 stitches per year on my main piece, so as this was just over 300,000 stitches, that rounds to about right, 3 years. So the next project I'm planning is 200,000 exactly. It's 400 by 500 stitches. It's Deer Creek, and so I expect that to take a couple of years. Because I say 6,000 a month, which, you know, doesn't quite add up to 100,000 per year, but I do usually manage more than that. So I do know there were some stitchers who had a goal of 500,000 last year. I'm not sure if they made it though. I thought, wow, I'm not even going to kid myself. There's no way I'm getting that many done. I would love it if I could, but I'm definitely not that quick. This month shouldn't be too hard because, as you can see, there's quite a lot of bigger sections here. And then once I get past the fence, I have the pink flowers, although it's not very much of the flower, it's mostly the leaves around those big pink flowers that will be sort of next. So So everyone really seemed to like my episode where I talked about a lot of movie trivia about It's a Wonderful Life. So I thought maybe today I would talk about The Princess Bride, because I actually read the book that was written about it by the star who played Wesley, Carrie Elwes, which is how it says is pronounced according to his IMDb page. I was always pronouncing it Els or Ools, but apparently it's Elwes, so at least that's what they said. So if I get it wrong, I apologize. It's IMDb's fault. Anyway, it was called As You Wish, of course, right? And he wrote it about his experiences on set. It went on sale a few years ago and I read it, so it was quite enjoyable. Lots of little tidbits there. So he wrote about, what was it? Well, Andre the Giant. And he said, yeah, the director was kind of like, he producers and directors and all that kind of got the project going and said, well, we hope we can get him to agree to be in this movie because we kind of don't really have anyone else who can do that role. I mean, nowadays it probably wouldn't be as hard. You know, we've got pretty good CGI, motion capture, all that stuff. But back when they made it, yeah, they kind of needed the guy who had the giantism, you know, to actually play that part. So, but yeah, they said there was difficulty because when they had to go on locations, there was one that was sort of up on a mountain, and he couldn't ride in a regular van with everyone else because of his sheer size. So they had to get him a little ATV to ride. Well, not so little, I guess, but an ATV to ride so that he could make it up there. And anyway, apparently Carrie decided to have fun with it. And he rode it around, and he caught his foot and almost broke it. It was really, really bad. He said it got pinched really bad, and he didn't want to tell anyone what had happened because he didn't want to get in trouble, because he figured, oh, I wasn't supposed to be, you know, touching this piece of equipment. So he didn't tell anyone and had to limp around. And so if you're watching closely, there's a scene in the movie where he sits down and leans up against this big fallen log, and he's got his legs stretched out in front of him. And he said that was actually because he couldn't bend his knee, and everything. He was in so much pain, and he was trying to hide it. But at the very end, as they're walking down out of the scene, you can see him limping quite noticeably. And yeah, that was because he'd injured himself. And okay, so I'm going to go sort of this far, and then I'm going to kind of cut through this dark blue here. I'm going to cut it off there and kind of curve it back. And then I will come in and fill in more later. So I'll only go sort of so far. I don't want to go all the way across. I'll sort of go part of the way, and then I'll fill in the top and continue on. But anyway, so he said there was that. And he said when they were filming the scene, when they're going up the side of the mountain, it was really, really cold. And Robin, who played the princess, she was freezing. And of course, she wasn't supposed to be visibly shivering in the scene. And so they said in between takes, Andre the Giant would stick his hand on top of her head, and it was so warm that he said it was like having a hot water bottle on top of your head, and that would stop her shivering. And then he would take it off when they did the take, but apparently it helped enough that it kept her from shivering in the cold visibly during the shot. So they managed to get it done without sort of wrecking the ambiance. And he said Wally Shawn was convinced the whole time that he was going to get fired, which is funny because apparently they said the director never had anyone else in mind for that part. It belonged to him. And I mean, ask someone to name what he's played in, almost everyone will come up with Princess Bride first. Like, he was the Grand Nagus in Deep Space Nine, the Ferengi leader, and he was the green dinosaur in Toy Story, and other, you know, fairly famous roles, but I think that's the one, Inconceivable. That's the one everybody knows him from, right? Okay, pull this color out because I've got a lot of it coming up. Over 4,500 stitches of it still to go. I was working on Firefly yesterday, so that's why it was back in its envelope, because it's used on that project quite a bit too. I actually managed to get quite a lot of that done last month, over 4,000 stitches, so I was very happy with that. Usually I manage about 1,500 to 2,000 if I'm lucky. So, but anyway, he said the sword fight that is between you know, the very famous one at the top of the mountain, they did all of that. The only part that was done by a stunt person was the part when Wesley sort of grabs the bar and flips over it a few times, but everything else was done by the actors. So that was the thing that was filmed last, because they needed the entire length of time during shooting to practice it when they weren't actively filming. And so they were choreographed by real sword masters. They said it was like a dance, basically. And anyway, they got about halfway through filming of the movie, and the director said, okay, let's do a run through. And they performed it for him. And he said, you know, it needs to be a minute longer. And so they had to basically go back and re-choreograph the entire thing to add another minute in, which isn't easy to do. You know, if you've been practicing something for quite a while and then they want to change it, it can be tough, because by that point you've got muscle memory kind of taking over, because of course that's the whole point of practicing it so many times, is so that you can do it without having to consciously think about every step, every movement. But he said, okay, that's what they did. So but obviously it turned out well. It was quite an iconic scene. And what else do I remember from the book? Mandy Patinkin, at the end, when his character fights with the six-fingered man, he said he imagined, because his father had passed away from cancer, and so to film that scene and to get the emotion that he needed in that scene, he imagined he was fighting his father's cancer. So I said, oh, the next time I watch that movie, that's going to make me cry, because at the end, you know, he says, I'll give you anything you want. What do you want? And he says, I want my father back, right? And yeah, so knowing that he was bringing that into his character is, oh my, makes it a more emotionally powerful scene, right? Yeah, it was, like I said, it was a really fun read. Lots of good little tidbits in there. There was one he said that he remembers Andre the Giant. He passed out in the lobby of the hotel where they were filming one night. And of course, like, nobody could move him. He's Andre the Giant, right? He was huge. And so they said what they did was they went and got those velvet ropes, you know, the kind that they used to rope off areas like in the bank or whatever, and they put those around him so nobody would disturb him while he was sleeping it off. Oh. But unfortunately, yeah, it's not all funny. Apparently he was in quite a lot of pain while filming. He had been in that, you know, the wrestling stuff, and sort of a lot of the people, because he was so big, they were quite rough on him, and unfortunately, yeah, he was in quite a lot of pain. I mean, especially they say because of their size, they tend to be in a lot of pain. People with that, with his condition, tend to be in a lot of pain because the joints are holding so much weight, more than really those joints are, you know, intended to hold. And yeah, it didn't help that he had people, you know, jumping up and down on him in the wrestling ring and stuff. Poor guy. But there was one, they said, there's that iconic scene when Wesley jumps in after the princess when she gets sucked down by the lightning sand or whatever. And so they had built this set with a trap door that he would jump into and go through. And he was written into the script. He was supposed to jump in feet first. And he said no. The actor said, no, Wesley would dive in after her head first. That's what he'd do. That's his true love, right? He would go right after her. And they said, well, okay, but we can't guarantee your safety if you dive in head first. This trapdoor is designed to open, but we can't guarantee that it will open. Because, of course, if you jump in with both feet, door doesn't open, okay, no big deal, right? Maybe you get sore knees or ankles or something, but if you dive in head first and the door doesn't open, you could break your neck, right? And he said, but he was determined. He said that's what this character would do. And so they basically said, okay, you can do it as long as you promise you're not going to sue us if this doesn't work and the worst happens. And he was that committed to the character that he did it. And I think they only ever did the one take. That's the one that's in the movie. And dove in after her head first, and the door opened, thankfully, and everything turned out fine. But, yeah, he was quite committed to that part. There was a joke I remember that went around 2020 when somebody was talking about, oh, they should remake The Princess Bride, and I commented saying there's a shortage of perfect movies in this world. It would be a shame to ruin this one. Paraphrasing the movie, of course. Oh yeah, he said the scene when Wesley is mostly dead and they take him to the healer. They actually ended up having to use a dummy on the table because the actor could not stop laughing because of the stuff that Billy Crystal, because a lot of what his character says, he just made up. Billy Crystal, of course, very talented comedic actor, and so they let him ad-lib a lot of his lines, and because they weren't ready for it, they couldn't stop laughing, so they had to actually use a dummy on the table so as to not wreck the shot. So that's a little tidbit for you. Is he totally dead or mostly dead? He said they made his face mask when he was playing, the Dread Pirate Roberts, was done where they did an actual plaster cast of his whole head so that they could make a perfectly fitting custom mask. And he says quite difficult if you have claustrophobia, because they encase your entire head in the alginate or whatever it is they use to make the mold, when you just have a couple of straws in your nostrils to breathe through. I can't even imagine. I don't think I could do it. And he said during the process they told him, if you need to tap out, we can stop anytime. However, if you tap out, we're going to have to try again. So he said it took, I think he said 15 to 20 minutes or something. He had to be with this stuff setting around his head to get the cast. And he really wanted to tap out at one point, but was sort of, okay, I've already gone in this, 10 minutes. I don't want to do this whole thing over again. So he persevered, and they managed to get it on the first try. Oh yeah, and there was the scene when the six-fingered man hits him with the butt of the sword and knocks him out. And of course the actor was being very careful to not actually hit him because it's very heavy, right? And Carrie kind of just said, no, go for it. It's fine. I trust you. And so he did, and he accidentally cracked him for real and knocked him out cold. And that's the one they use in the movie. So if you watch it and he hits him and he falls like a sack of potatoes and you think, wow, that looks really realistic, that's because it was real. He did knock him out for real, and the actor was extremely apologetic when he came to. And he kind of just said, no, I told you to do it. And they did not do any more takes, I think, of that. They got what they needed. Oh, dear. Yeah, well, that and the diving head first through the trapdoor. I mean, he sure showed he had commitment to the part. I guess that's why they cast him. They did a good job. All right, so looking at this, I'm going to just take a look at this other strand I have here, which is, not terribly long. Okay, I know what I'm going to do. First, I'm going to kind of use up this strand here that I parked here. Yeah, can you figure out what I'm going to do? which direction I'm gonna go. But he said, of course, to this day, even when he goes to a restaurant and orders something, people will say, "As you wish," you know. It's like, yeah, I bet that gets old after a while. Like, everyone will think they're so original doing it, but. So that was what he named the book he wrote about, his experiences on that set. Oh, and apparently they said one of the shots was ruined because there's where her dress catches on fire as they're going through the swamp or whatever, and apparently one of the actors didn't know that was going to happen, and so he ruined the take by screaming, "Oh my God, she's on fire!" Which of course wasn't easy to do, right? The fire shots are done under very controlled circumstances, and apparently one of the guys who was in the rodents of unusual size costume got pulled over driving to work while in costume. So was it because he was speeding, or was the officer just kind of like, "What the heck is that? I have to see." All right, so what I'm gonna do is, there's this flower petal here that kind of interrupts that color. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start from the inside out and kind of fill that in, and then we'll work around it, and I'll add more to it later. So just kind of working my way down towards that far left corner there. Saying that "as you wish" because, yeah, we've seen him in some other movies, and I was like, "Who is that?" "You know, As You Wish." Oh yeah. He was in Lady Jane, I think was made the next year. That's one of my favorites. I know that they changed, it wasn't totally accurate to history, because as far as history goes, it doesn't look like Lady Jane fell in love with the guy she was forced to marry like they show in the movie, but I enjoyed it anyway. Patrick Stewart was in that one. He played her father. Yeah, some parts that people take, that ends up being who they are forever. Like Brent Spiner, who played Data in Star Trek, said, I mean, everybody will, "Oh, it's Data," not "It's Brent Spiner." And it's kind of funny because he said that's, of course, his most iconic role. He almost didn't take it. He kind of thought, the character who has no human emotions, wouldn't that be very sort of flat to play? He didn't think that it would challenge him at all. And his agent convinced him to take it, basically said, "Look, take the part. If we have to get out of this contract, I'll find a way. But I really think you should take this part." And he said, "Well, good thing I listened to him," because that, of course, actually, he said, ended up being probably his most challenging role to play. Data is a favorite for a reason. He's the way we examine the human condition from the outside looking in. He was definitely my favorite character in probably all of the Star Treks. All right, so I'm going to move this screen over a little bit. Do some more of this blue, this navy. As you can see, the flowers, purple flowers kind of scattered through it. I'm looking forward to the new Star Trek series that's coming out in January. Star Trek Academy, I think it's called, or Starfleet Academy, something like that. But yeah, I am definitely looking forward to that. There's some people in fan groups I'm in who complained about the movies that were made, early 2000s, and I'm thinking, yeah, but because of that, we got the shows back. I enjoyed them too. I thought they cast really well. Chris Pine as Kirk, Zachary Quinto as Spock. I thought they did really well. Carl Urban as Bones. Apparently his performance was so good that Leonard Nimoy said it brought him to tears because it reminded him so well of his old friend, DeForest Kelley, who had, of course, passed on by that time. Zachary Quinto was actually personally chosen by Leonard Nimoy to play young Spock in the movies. They did very, very well. And then in the shows, Ethan Peck, who is Gregory Peck's grandson, plays young Spock. And he does very well. It's funny because I didn't realize that he was Ethan Peck's grandson, but I remember watching him and thinking, wow, he looks so familiar. Have I seen him in something before? And then looked up and went, oh, okay, Gregory Peck's grandson. I see the resemblance now. That's why. I'm very sad, though, because the one he plays in Strange New Worlds is apparently going to end after season 5. I was hoping that maybe they would, because they say its 5-year mission is in the opening titles, and I was kind of hoping that maybe they would massage the timeline kind of like they did for, say, MASH, which went on for 11 seasons only, even though the actual Korean War only lasted for like 3 and stuff, or like that 70s show where it was 1979 for like 4 years. But I guess they chose not to. It's like, darn. And they only did 10 episodes a season, so I do miss the old shows that were, over 150 episodes throughout their run or more. And they just don't make it like that anymore, and I do miss that. I often said, because I actually like when they had to do bottle shows, sometimes those were some of the best shows because they were deep into the character development, because they would often have to use sort of the existing set pieces and such and not be able to afford to go on location or build new set design and stuff. They would have to reuse what they already had. So like I said, it often became a character driven story, and those are my favorite. Not that I don't enjoy a good, chase scene or fight scene or whatever, but it's the character stuff that keeps me coming back. I'll often say I don't even mind if a story is somewhat cliche. If your characters are good and I care about what happens to them, I will watch it or read it or whatever it is. I will happily consume it. We watched The Visitor a few weeks ago, a Deep Space Nine episode, which is kind of a bottle show, and oh my gosh, of course, as always, it utterly emotionally destroyed me by the end. Darn, I hate when that happens. Ooh, somebody's very squeaky brakes out there. My gosh. Ugh, something's rattling on this table. I'll try to get it to stop. Oh, I think I dropped my scissors, darn it. Oh, no, I didn't. Okay. They're still in my lap. So I was kind of thinking, how am I going to reach for them without moving my camera setup? Alrighty. Grab a new thread here. So of course, this is the final pass. This is the one where all the zeros are going to start showing up. Perhaps not for a little bit, but we will get there. Those are always fun. I've got, I think, about 20 colors have been completed at this point, been zeroed out. Right down to the bottom here. I don't think I'll work the whole way down to the bottom in this session. And of course, I am keeping all my pin stitches above this line, everything else, because this is the very end of the piece here, so I will draw all the ends through to the center of the piece and away from the edges so they don't show. Getting closer here, as you can see. Now only 19 stitches left of this color, so the end is in sight, although I don't think they're in this area. I think, yeah, they're kind of scattered all the way through. Like I said, we had some wild temperature swings. We had -30 one day, the next day was +2. Which I actually prefer when it doesn't get that warm, because made the roads very treacherous, because you ended up with a nice layer of, it melted and then you get a nice layer of ice on top of everything, and then sometimes it snows a little on top of that, and it just makes it extremely slippery. My husband had to travel for work, and he was fine, thankfully. But he said, yeah, he came across an accident between 2 tractor trailers. Thankfully, it didn't look like anybody was hurt, just property damage. But yeah, one of them was a car carrier and collided with another because of the ice. Of course, they need a lot more space to stop. We had that once. We were traveling during January on the Coquihalla, and car carrier jackknifed and spread cars all across the highway. Thankfully, again, nobody was hurt, so, but it was shut down for a while while they cleared that up, and that was before the, I believe they started the Discovery Channel show Highway Through Hell. My husband is in that, and Ice Road Truckers, they like watching. I think Highway Through Hell ended. But I think Ice Road Truckers is still being made. And there was another one they watched, which was called Heavy Rescue 401. And there's a new one that started, I think, last year called Rocky Mountain Wreckers. So, yeah, they like watching those. Shows the crews having to figure out how to clear highways and stuff after these kind of things happen, because it's no simple feat. They're dealing with mountain conditions, lots of snow in the middle of storms, and these great big rigs, you can't just easily tow them out. Got to use cranes and stuff sometimes. That's a lot of work. Our son, when they started watching, he was like 8 or something, and so sometimes he would actually recreate the little scenes with his Lego and toys, and then pretend he's trying to tow things out of the out of the ditch and stuff. Okay, so I'm going to draw this along the back. Again, getting close to that edge there. So I'd say 90 to 95% of the time I use pin stitches to end off threads. But of course, when I get to the edges here, then that does change. Okay, another one of that. So I'm thinking 93%. Oh, I'm gonna need a whole new skein for that one. 93% by the end of January is probably going to be doable. Because I'm already partway into 91%, so that's makes it less than 6,000 stitches, so that should not be a problem. Might even reach 94. We'll see. Those. So I'm going to kind of focus on these two little flowers and the bits around it for now. And then I will come back and work some more. All right, let me see what I'm going to do. Oh dear. Oh, pardon me. Oh yeah, so I talked before on other episodes about how I keep track of my reading. I use Goodreads, and I also use Storygraph because I like their charts and stuff. I'm a nerd who likes those kind of things, so So according to them, I read over 18,000 pages last year in 2025. And said, I'm not sure how accurate that is because there are some books that, I don't think I went back down in the exact same spot there. That's why that didn't want to pop to the back. Yeah. Let's see if I can pull it up or not without wrecking it, hopefully. Oh yeah, I see now. I didn't initially come up in the right spot. Anyway, I was saying, still it goes by how many books I've completed. I said there are some books that I read sort of half to 2/3 of it and kind of skipped to the end because I didn't really care as much, but I wanted to see how it ended. But at the same time, there are also ones that I started and didn't finish, so it probably all balances out in the end. Because I started about 70 something and I finished 59 books. So, like I said, it probably works out even. So I read, I think, over 10% nonfiction last year. I was trying to increase the amount. I think I read 10 nonfiction last year. So, maybe not quite that many, something like that. But so I did manage to increase the amount of nonfiction. I kind of find with nonfiction, I read sort of a chapter, and then I kind of go back to a fiction book so that I can start to get drowsy. But if I try to sort of sit there and read an entire nonfiction book without any breaks, I think my brain gets bored. So I kind of break them up. And like I said, I do a chapter here, chapter there, sort of every night. And then I go to fiction books. Kind of the same of what I do with my my stitching. My Ocarina of Time stained glass Zelda, I add a thread a day. Because if I was stitching just all that unrelenting black, I would get really sick of it. But I can sort of add a thread a night. It's not a big deal. So I kind of do the same with my reading. But I set my goal of 52 books a year. So that's one a week. And I generally manage to surpass it. I got 59 last year, so almost 60. So I'm pretty happy with that. But I don't set my goal at 60 because then I get all stressed out that I'm falling behind. Although I generally do tend to sort of fall behind around, I'd say, August or so. But then I pick it up because I read more in December. So again, it all kind of evens out in the end. Yes. So I said 59. I think 13 of them were novellas, but I'm still pretty happy with that. Kind of blew my mind that there's some people who just never really read anymore once they were done with required reading. And yeah, I could never do that. I don't read like I used to. I used to read like 3 books a week, but I can't concentrate the way I used to. And these were mass market paperbacks, they weren't 3,000 page, War and Peace tomes, but still, So I generally read books around 350 pages to 400 pages, or kind of the average. But that was something I was listening to on a podcast saying that the mass market paperback is it's disappearing, and that's sort of changing the market again. Most paperbacks now are trade size and they cost more. And so they're saying, at least for physical print sales, it has changed things yet again. The industry's always changing, and they said yet that has changed things again because people used to take a lot more chances on new authors when, mass market paperback books were like $5. Now when a book is $26, you know, you're not quite so eager to pick up a author you've never read before when it's an investment of a lot more money than it used to be, you know, 6 times what it used to be. Even with inflation, it's more expensive, you know, even when you adjust for inflation, it's still quite a lot more expensive now to try a new author. Unless you go buy ebooks, but not all authors will put their books at a deeper discount. There's some that the paperback will cost you $8 and the ebook will cost you $8 too, so it is very rare. Oh, I didn't want to pin stitch, I forgot. Okay, that's all right. I pin stitched once, I'll leave that, and then I'll draw this along the back here. Right, I forgot. I don't want to pin stitch that close to the edge, especially with a bright, bright pink or purple, because I don't want it to show through. I just forgot. Yeah. And things have changed because there's a lot of people like me too who don't really read physical books that much anymore. I set myself a goal a few years ago to read at least one shelf's worth of the paperbacks I have, and I think I read 3 books in print, something like that. It was not very much. So like I said, I've been spoiled by, the biggest thing is being able to make the font whatever size I want, and you can even choose what font you wish to read it from, because some fonts people find easier on the eyes than others, right? And so there's that as well. I'm gonna have a couple threads here, this color. Let me just pull that. There we go. Yeah, it's kind of easier too. At least, I don't know about other ebook retailers, but I know Amazon has, most books you can have a sample sent for free to your e-readers. So you can get the first chapter or something and see how you like it. That can kind of help if you don't want to commit yourself to a whole purchase yet. You can try a first chapter or two, see how it captures if it captures your attention or not. See if you like the author's voice, as they call it, or not. I do not have the patience to read purple prose anymore. When I was a teenager, I read all of the Kathleen E. Woodowist books, but she's very purple, very flowery. And it's entirely on me. I don't have the mental capacity anymore to read something that almost is kind of Shakespearean and you have to convert it in your head or translate it almost. My thumb must have dragged across some already completed stitches. Yeah, you can only highlight either stitches that haven't been completed or stitches that have, but you can't do both, obviously. The program is incapable of doing that because you're either marking or erasing. You can't do both at the same time. Yeah, the other thing too saying about mass market paperbacks is they do they're not the best quality. I have some, I was rereading some old favorites, Christmas stories, and yeah, some of those books are like 30 years old now. They were published 90s, and yeah, some of them are starting to fall apart. And I went to see if I could maybe get, if I could buy it as a ebook. But some of them have been, but some of them haven't been. I guess it depends on the publisher. Because some of them I looked in, like, there's only a few sort of secondhand old copies out there, and there's not a lot of them. So some of the times the retailers want like $75 for an old mass market paperback. Like, yeesh. So I better take good care of mine. Some I have repurchased as ebooks. But yeah, some of them it's just not available. Well, they said for most of them, you have to sacrifice a physical copy of the book to make an ebook because, of course, the, pardon me, the original files are long gone. And so they have a data reader where basically they said, but you have to take the book, you have to kind of cut the spine off, and then it pulls the pages through and scans them. And so you do have to sacrifice a physical copy. I mean, unless somebody's willing to sit there retyping it, which is unlikely. And then someone has to go through and proofread it because depending on the fonts, sometimes the reader does not get it correct. I've read a few books that were obviously done by that, and some of the ones were not proofread very well, and some of the translations were kind of weird. There was one I read and it said she pressed her ups together, and I'm like, her ups? And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, I bet the original said lips, but because of the kerning on the font, it couldn't read it correctly. And because that ups is technically a word, it wouldn't be caught by a basic spell check, right? It would need to be actually proofread by a human being to go, yeah, that's not right. Okay, so I did that. Switch colors again. So reaching 200 this session was no problem. As, like I said, this was not a lot of colors changes. There were a lot of big blocks here. The funniest one somebody was saying was that sometimes the word arms became anus because of the font kerning. So that could make for some rather amusing lines there. So I'm just kind of feathering this line so it doesn't make a straight line. less likely to leave a tension line in the work that way. I've never had a problem with it, but I figure it can't hurt. Sort of take a preventative measure anyway. Very exciting to reach the bottom here. All right, so I'm past 200 now. So I think that is where I'm going to call it a day. Like I said, I'm going to fill this in, and then I'm going to probably work along that edge, keep filling in, and then move the whole frame over and continue working from there. So just slowly piecing this together until it's done. So yeah, thank you so much for joining me today, and I hope to see you here next time. Thanks, everyone. Bye.